the Academy of Homiletics syllabi for DEI. And we will also look at some overall conclusions, recommendations, and questions to ponder. So how did the syllabi compare with the survey? You may remember, and if you have not watched this yet, I invite you to go back and watch it, our initial report to the Academy of Homiletics on our self-reported attitudes and practices around DEI. This was our member survey. So now we have harder data to compare with our self-reported attitudes and practices. So our survey respondents were self-reported a 16.8% average increase in prioritizing DEI through required readings, recommended readings, non-textual and artistic resources, and bibliographies between the two time periods that we've reported to you. The syllabi, however, showed a 26.2% average increase in addressing DEI through those same methods. So we see that we're actually doing a little bit better than we feel or perceive ourselves to be doing. So the artifacts of the syllabi are correlating with what homileticians are self-reporting about their increased prioritization of DEI in their teaching.
Let's talk a little bit about how we graded the syllabi. What was our method? Well, for each syllabus, the coder filled out a tally sheet where they assigned points that enabled them to calculate a grade. So there were 53 different DEI keywords, everything from ableism to xenophobia and everything in between. And when if they found a certain amount, they were able to assign points for that. And if they saw course resources with authors of color or those outside the US or addressing a DEI topic, they got points if they were in the required or assigned text, in the recommended text, in non-text resources, and in the bibliography. So they got points assigned for that. And then if they saw instances in the syllabi with a specific commitment to a culture of DEI in the classroom or institution, then they got points assigned for things such as encouraging people to use their pronouns and using inclusive language for the divine. And then they assigned points for seeing assignments that engage diversity, equity, and inclusion. So how did we do? Well, in 2015 to 2018, you can see that only 6% of the syllabi were graded as getting an A in terms of having markers of DEI. 19% had Bs, 17% had Cs, 35% were a D, and 24% were F. Those numbers do better when we get to 2019 to 2022. Our A's go up to 13%, our B's go up to 29%, our C's go up to 26%, and our D's and our F's decrease. So that is a really good thing to see. Now, when we do it in terms of subgroups of respondents, here's what we see for our white respondents in 2015 to 2018. And we can definitely see that the minoritized groups were already doing better in terms of A's and C's, but interestingly, had more D's and less F's. So mixed bag there. But whites increase when we get to 2019 to 2022. So their A's go up, their B's go down slightly, but their C's go up, and the D's and F's go down. So we're definitely seeing a more even distribution there. And minoritized respondents, we see an increase in A's, huge jump in B's, and everything else goes down. So we definitely see more of a concerted effort among minoritized respondents. We also saw improvements in specific ways. So just for an example, one of the analysts said, I saw enormous leap forward from the previous syllabi. They attend to what it is like to live in and preach from particular bodies as the course attends to performance. Another analyst said, I saw a significant attention given to DEI in attending to classroom culture and not requiring entire books, but instead chapters and articles from a vast diversity of voices. Another coder said that they saw DEI concerns addressed directly in a part called Some Additional Guidelines for Our Learning section, and a significant leap forward in attentiveness from the professor's previous syllabi. And then another one said they focused on Black women preaching and included a diverse range of non-textual materials, provided detailed rationale and examples of inclusive language practices. So when our coders went through these syllabi, they got the same people. They didn't know who they were, but they would know, okay, this is respondent number 4A, and this was their pre-intervention syllabi, and now I'm looking at the post one. So they were able to compare apples to apples when they were doing this analysis. One thing to note, however, is that there are some caveats with grading the syllabi. Some syllabi received higher grades because of the number of DEI keywords, but it didn't necessarily incorporate DEI themes into assignments or move beyond token nods to DEI. So they checked the boxes, but didn't really have didn't convey the sense that, yes, this is really important. There was maybe too much space to evade DEI. And a lot of it might have come from just institutional boilerplate assignments. And then some syllabi received lower grades for DEI because it was just difficult to assess the nuances that might have contributed to DEI awareness and engagement. One coder said, while the syllabus does not score many points, the learning goals suggest that there is more than meets the eye. For example, they wrote, explain several ways of effectively preparing and delivering a sermon, suggests a commitment to diversity, and demonstrate enhanced knowledge of and respect for ethnic and cultural differences in preaching is another way that that is expressed. Also, we need to note that there are other cultural and societal factors that might be influencing the grading in the post-intervention syllabi. So remember that in 2019 and following, we had the murder of George Floyd and the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement. There was COVID, anti-Asian bias, the border crisis. So this is reflected in one of the comments made by one of our coders, who said, this is the fourth version of this course we have seen in by the same instructor, which is fascinating to observe. It is being co-taught for the first time in this rendition. The course made a significant jump from a D to an A according to our criteria. Of course, the world changed dramatically between 2019 and 2022. However, this change to co-teaching may also say something significant about what bringing a new voice into the room can do.
So let's turn to some overall conclusions, some questions and recommendations that we have from this portion of the project. So we are improving as a guild. Our attention to DEI has increased in syllabi in 2019 to 2022 when compared to 2015 to 2018. However, we do want to make some notes. Overall, our male colleagues appear to be doing less in regard to DEI compared with female colleagues. And in addition, overall, our white colleagues appear to be doing less with regard to DEI compared to colleagues of minoritized groups. And overall, those who identify as heterosexual appear to be doing less in regard to DEI compared with their LGBTQIA+ colleagues. So these subgroups do make a difference in terms of analyzing the data that we have in front of us. We also want to note that there has been an overall increase in the number of female authors used in syllabi between the two time periods. That increases in DEI have focused primarily on Black and African American issues of identity and interest. So interests of other groups are underrepresented in comparison. So one of our coders noted that the syllabus shows that the instructor made deliberate effort to address racism by incorporating various class materials drawn from different racial identity groups in the US. However, the required book section reveals a preference for only discussing Black and white issues, which can reinforce a binary perspective on racism. International scholars, so our colleagues from around the globe, and their interests are underrepresented as well. So some questions for us to ponder. So we noted just in the slide before that there's a growth in focus on African-American homiletics, but should publishers invite more scholars of color to write basic preaching texts rather than text focused on individual issues of identity? Or do homileticians need to use the texts that are already out there and that already exist? Or is it better to move away from textbooks altogether, recognizing that as a particular kind of epistemology, and knowing that some homileticians from minoritized communities resist writing textbooks, and thus the pool would be smaller? And does the focus on African-American homiletics over the last 4 to 5 years, while it demonstrates a necessary and vital improvement, does it also have a simultaneous effect of minimizing attention paid toward homiletics from other marginalized groups? So is there a way to seek a balance? So how do we attend to non-white and non-Black social identities? One of our accountability partners in this study, Kenyatta Gilbert, observed that the human community has not done enough work examining racial hierarchy and how racialized groups adopt different strategies when addressing matters that pertain to group preservation. So Kenyatta, I think, invites us to think beyond this binary and deconstructing what this means in terms of global visibility and diversity. This is hard to do, but based on experience, many minoritized groups aspire to assimilate into what is deemed respectable to whites based on hierarchical norms and success criteria established by white persons. So we're just acknowledging the difficulty of what we are trying to see and move toward as individuals and as a guild. Equally true is that whites are generalized in assessment studies as if there's no real cultural differences in what is perceived to be monolithic. So another question to ponder is, what's enough when it comes to DEI and syllabi? So we noted before, even some of our syllabi that got good grades, if you will, may not have measured up in terms of the ethos of the syllabi. So how is it that we might determine, can we determine what might be enough when it comes to DEI? What constitutes enough text or materials, assignments, syllabi language to be considered sufficiently addressing DEI and not just tokenism? How can we establish a threshold by which to gauge sufficient DEI? We've already noted the problems in our own study. And then that some students are only required to take one course in preaching. One of our research analysts noted this. How can professors incorporate DEI into their teaching when there is so little time to work with students and so much material to cover? And then we do want to note and invite you all to consider, what have we learned in this project that can be applied to other theological education disciplines and to schools as a whole? So some recommendations for syllabi. First, do more than check boxes for DEI. Create assignments that ensure engagement with these topics and places of interest. And it's not just what DEI items are included in the syllabus, but placement. So thinking about, if you will, the geography of a syllabus, what goes in places of prominence? Can our diversity statements be near the top of the syllabus rather than at the end, which might be considered an afterthought? When we recommend commentaries for preaching, do we include a variety of biblical scholars from diverse places representing perspective explicit interpretations? And then including photos of authors. As we noted earlier, representation matters. Include photos of authors used in the course in the syllabus or in class slides to show the humanity and diversity of scholars the students will engage in the course. Next, we encourage that professors include personal statements of their own demographics and intersectionalities. We encourage folks to use their personal pronouns and explicitly state expectations of respect for pronouns, not just for themselves, but for everyone in the class. And then language in the syllabus around classroom culture and DEI is important and should be included. So noting the ways that the class should be interfacing with one another and respecting one another. And then offering options for students with different learning styles and those whose primary language is different than English. So what options do you give for students who may not be as good writers as they are perhaps speakers, noting that those can often be related to cultural differences. And of course, those who come into our classrooms who have different first languages than English, which is on the rise.
So in terms of recommendations for our guild, one is that we can see from this data that white professors should increase the number of required texts by authors from historically marginalized groups. Teaching and scholarship should pay attention to those topics that are not getting sufficient attention in the academy and focus their research there. So LGBTQIA issues, Indigenous and Native American perspectives, patriarchy, neurodiversity, white Christian nationalism. These are all areas that were not well represented in the syllabi. Also, teaching and scholarship should focus more attention on international scholars and concerns. Presently, our guild is very US-centric. We are definitely making efforts to expand beyond that, but we can always do more. For our guild as a whole, what we would like to recommend is that a team put together an annotated bibliography of DEI texts, authors, and resources so that everyone can see what's out there and what's possible. We can create a repository of assignments that embed diversity, equity, and inclusion so that we can each contribute to these ideas and share amongst ourselves. We can create a repository of syllabi that are exemplars of engaging DEI. We also think that perhaps it's possible to establish a threshold for the standard of DEI in syllabi and pedagogy. So we'll try to figure out what is the line between tokenism and genuine, authentic engagement with diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, just a word about the limitations of this study. First of all, we need to note that there is something called a low inter-rater reliability. In terms of social science, that means that we only had one person examining these syllabi. If we would have had more funding, we could have had all the coders examine all the syllabi and compare results for consistency. We just did not have a big enough grant to do that, so we had a lower inter-rater reliability. We also note that we did not have enough representation of Hispanic and Latina scholars, which we will need to correct for in future studies. We need to have specific outreach to engage these scholars in our future research. There were also some challenges in interpreting the data, like what is accounting for the shifts that we're seeing? Is it because there's more diverse materials that are being made available? Is it because there are more diverse faculty? Is it because there's more diverse student body? Maybe it's a combination of all of these. And we would like to think that it's partly because of our emphasis on unmasking homiletical whiteness. There's no way to know for sure. We can't confuse correlation with causation, but we're definitely seeing some parallels. Also, we might be seeing what's called the maturation effect. that individuals just make changes in how they teach and how they research over time as they grow and as they learn. And there might be a period effect. We mentioned some of the societal factors that might have influenced the syllabi and the content thereof, especially in the post-intervention period.
So where do we go from here? Well, we have more to come, and we are proposing some future presentations from this project. So we would examine course assignments and DEI to explore intersectionality and a more fine nuance to what we've already explored. We would love to consider the larger changes in theological education and how this impacts the teaching of preaching, particularly around shifting demographics of student bodies, attending to different learning styles, and the emergence of hybrid or completely online courses and how this impacts teaching homiletics. And we would love to do another assessment of syllabi from 2023 to 2025, which would allow us to continue tracking the data that we've already begun. If you have questions that you want to pursue, we want to make sure you know that the data that we have in hand is the Academy of Homiletics data. Let us know how we can support your questions and your interests. Obviously, we have more work that we want to do, and if you are excited about this as we are, we'd love for you to join us. We assure you that there is plenty of work to go around, and plenty of ways that we can dive deeper and more nuanced into this material. Finally, we want to thank our team members. They've done an incredible amount of work in investing in this project. So thanks to everyone who shared syllabi as well. Thanks to everyone who took surveys, but especially thanks to our team members, Kenyatta Gilbert, Iron Kim Cragg, Kizzy Bush Boyd, Samantha Gilmore, Larry Morris, and Wing Yi Wong. We're especially grateful for them and their work. And thanks to you all for your time, your attention, and your interests in this project.